I want to talk a little bit more about that because I think that that's powerful. And it's also a place where many of us have trouble and we stumble and we get a little confused and also the frustration then appears as a block so that we don't know how to move further with it. So can you talk a little bit about how you were able to like go from just the sensing that something was going on into more concrete, like this is what it is for me?
I think it came through the practice of really of letting him go, of letting my husband, of energetically releasing, consciously releasing the codependency about him needing to make me feel worthy and him needing to commit and not abandon to the not abandoning me part. When I did that and when I sucked it up and said, damn it, I've got to do this for myself. Once I did that, then I could feel a little relaxing on his part. I didn't know if he was doing his own personal work about it, and I had to let that go too,
Mm.
because I'm the only one that I can work on. And I can't, just because I'm mad and I'm having to go through this process and I'm having to grow up and become a better support of myself. It doesn't mean that he has to. That's his choice of whether to do that or not. So again, taking responsibility for myself, coming into myself, giving myself, really taking responsibility to give myself what I need. Then there became this, well, then why are we together? You know,
Yes,
like
yes,
you
because
said,
there's the shift. Yeah,
there's the shift.
yeah.
And it's like, well, then I had to outline that for myself. I had to become aware of why I want to be in this relationship. And I think it has been really important to speak that to myself, to write that in my journal, to have language about why I'm in this relationship. Because if I'm not there for financial support, if I'm not there for um, worthiness support, if I'm not there for someone to say they're not going to abandon me, what is left? Like, what is that holds? And that is what really raised the um, the sweetness and the openness and the availability to another place. And we have been this fall playing with that, playing with that. And there's patterns. We've been together 8 years, so there's a lot of patterns in our day that stayed sort of stuck. Some of the old patterns stayed stuck. So we've now kind of come to a head that we've got to shake up what our old patterns have been so that we re-engage and really choose what it is that we want to do. And part of it was when we first got together, we wanted to be perfect for the other person, and so we did these things that really weren't us, and so you get into these habits and then you sort of start to resent them. And then so now's the shake up, now's the honesty, now's the okay, well,
Yeah.
it's really,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting. I love how you just explained that too. And it really, for me, was powerful because when you said, at the beginning of the relationship, we do these things for each other and it's not really who we are. It's interesting because, I've only been married 3 years and David and I have been together. So our journey has been, uh, interesting in that we're just starting to dismantle some of that early stuff. So I'm
yeah.
right where you are thinking about and and when I think about it for me, I think that it wasn't that I did those things that they weren't me. They were
Mm-hmm.
expressing the role that I was in at the time and the way that I wanted to express it. And so I'm listening,
Mm-hmm.
thinking, wow, it's that powerful shift of saying, why are we together? Who am I? How am I expressing myself? And those shifts then want to present themselves sometimes in different ways. Sometimes it's not, I'm not going to pick up your dishes anymore. I'm going to go downstairs and write on the computer and you're going to pick up your own dishes. And now that's different than what we did before. But it doesn't mean I don't love you
Right.
and I don't honor you and I don't still want to have a life together,
Yeah.
right?
That's exactly what I've been going through, like this past week has just been, I feel like I've taken over the role of your mother.
Mm,
I'm doing the dishes, I'm doing the laundry, I'm getting the food, I'm cooking all the meals, which takes a lot of time and is really a role of a mother. And I put that out there and I put it on the table and I said, I just don't feel right doing that anymore.
Yeah.
It takes up too much energy. Let's decide on what we want to do together and do what we do together.
Yeah.
Or, it's up right now for sort of restructuring. And how will that show up? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
That's
still
great.
playing because I still find myself going, oh, well, let's see, there's dark clothes there that could go into my dark load, and I could just do that and just would be efficient. And well, you know, okay, or not. So am I going to do that or not? And which seems so silly when you're really talking about very, very deep work, but it is the material world pieces that need to be reorganized. And if there's stress about the material world patterns or ways of being together, then it's okay to consider bringing them up. And I could say, I can take responsibility when I bring something up. I've noticed that I have taken over all of these things. You didn't ask me to take over any of those. I just took them over. Um, so I'm taking responsibility for that I did that, and not blaming him that I'm doing that, and saying I need to restructure that, and then playing with it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And really only we can we can give ourselves permission to do that. That comes from our own inner authority to say, I need to revisit what I'm doing and how I'm doing my life and how I'm spending my precious energy. And only I can give myself permission for that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it comes from something that has been going on to a point that you create a crisis, and the crisis stirs and allows things. But how much better is it if we can say, take responsibility for what we've chosen to do, say that it feels like it's not working for me, and I want to put it on the table as a couple. I want to put it on our table, relationship table, and kind of look at it and just see what you feel. Because otherwise, it's a whole bunch of guessing that the other person wants you to do those things when you don't really know. And if you're just building up resentment, you're just not taking responsibility for what you've created. If I've created this in my life, I need to take responsibility for it,
Yeah.
um, and then talk through whatever comes out of it. And
Okay,
it's
so
easier to say than to do sometimes.
okay. Can you talk to me a little bit about the feeling of resentment? I think that I know when I'm working with clients, I talk a lot about anger and resentment in their relationship, and
uh,
how it's really the same emotion. It's just a different way of it expressing itself.
hmm.
So for you, can you describe? And I think some people have a hard time, like really. I think many times we've been conditioned not to pay attention to our resentment. So how
Yeah.
stay connected? Like, how do you connect with yours? How do you like let it flow? How do you, um, own it, so to speak, comfortably?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think there's a part of me as a female in this culture that I accept more responsibility than just my own resentment. Like I tend to take responsibility for somebody else's feelings. So that's one issue. So just trying to stay within my own self. Where I find that I get honest with myself about how am I doing, who am I, how's my life going, is in meditations in the morning. I have like just a prayerful meditation time, and I kind of tap into different things that are going on for me. I don't. It's really funny. I don't really tap into things that are going on for him. I really tap if I'm looking at, where are my resentments, or what am I holding on to, or, you know, do I really want whiskers in the sink kind of stuff. I mean, some of it's little stuff that I've kind of learned to say, I'd rather have whiskers in a sink and be in this relationship than have a clean sink. It was kind of like when I was raising kids. I'd rather have a little mess around the house now because I know when they're gone,
Mm.
my house is going to stay clean for weeks, which it does
Yeah.
currently, or snoring or something. I remember this Dagwood and Trudy comic strip, and Trudy's sleeping with Dagwood, and he's snoring away, and she's like can't sleep, and her eyes are like wah. And then she goes and chats with her friend, and her friend has just lost her husband, and she says, "What I miss the most is him snoring at night because." Something about that, her recognition of him being there. And so then the next scene is Trudy in bed, Dagwood's snoring, and she's like, ah, So it's that thing about, is this something that means I'm in a relationship with someone I want to be in? Am I going to try to make them perfect? Or am I going to be grateful that I'm in a good relationship and just work on my own stuff? Not work on them, their snoring, their whisker practices,
Yeah.
but really work on myself. So like I said, I think I take um, maybe I take a little bit overly responsibility. Like I don't necessarily ask him to take the same responsibility. I just feel like it's important for me and who I am to work from myself.
Yeah. So that was a great example too, because it almost really cycled us back to where we started, which was that idea of how do you get your own needs met? And I was thinking about
Ah,
that great example of snoring is really interesting because um, why don't we like snoring? We don't like snoring usually because it keeps us awake and we don't get our sleep.
right. Or is it that as women in our 50s and whatever ages we're in, there's a very light way of sleeping, is what I've noticed. Like I sleep very lightly.
Yes.
And it's not like, oh my God, I'm awake, I'm trying to get to sleep. It's not like insomnia. It's like a creative, spiritual kind of time. I'm resting, but I'm not sleeping. And what I found is that it's a very rich time. So I could, if I wanted to, slip out of bed and go sleep in another room and allow that time to be there like that. Or I can be present in it and have the snoring come and go and check in with myself of how I'm judging that snoring.
Yeah.
So if I'm getting irritated with it, that's me getting irritated. So I really have to take responsibility. If I'm not comfortable, I can go to another room and sleep or on the couch or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's something important about just checking in with myself because I think that's really where we can avoid some of the resentment.
Mhm.
And I think that's what you were saying too. I think culturally for women, we are taught to keep our feelings to ourselves, not express them, but we're not even taught to express them to ourselves in a meaningful way.
Right, right.
And I think I'm learning how to express my own feelings to myself in a meaningful way. And I'm also recognizing that my feelings change. My spirit journey is sort of one thing, but from how I feel at night to how I feel the next morning to how I feel midday about the same whiskers in the sink is different. So I have
Yes,
to say it's all a judgment on my part. And
yes.
it's a shifting
Mhm.
judgment in a way. So if I can just say that to myself, that's a big part of um, becoming comfortable and centered and no matter what happens. So the more we do that, I think with our little things, then the more able we are when something big happens to be able to hold a space for ourselves, feel what we're feeling, but also hear what is going on for the other person. And and I think maybe that practice has been powerful in this last 6 months for me.
That's great.